Tonight on Ukraine Today. Strikes on the occupiers, loud explosions in Crimea in the Donetsk region and in Veliky Novgorod. OSINT analysts report the possible use of ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles. Spring counteroffensive, how the actions of the Ukraine's defense forces are disrupting the enemy's plans. Provocations against NATO. Russia is expanding military units near the alliance's borders. Tensions are also rising between Belarus and Poland. Russian assistance to Iran. What details and technologies Moscow is passing to Tehran and how Washington is reacting. All this and more right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Robchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and let's move to the news. Let us start with events in Crimea. There, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 3 Russian Panzer S-1 air defense missile and gun systems, a landing boat and a UAV base. A mobile fire group of the occupiers was also eliminated. Meanwhile, in Veliky Novgorod inside Russia, explosions were reported near the Akron chemical plant. For now, it is unclear whether this was the result of a Ukrainian strike. The information is still being verified. And here are the images of a destroyed Shahed drone base at the Donetsk airport. Let me remind you, Ukraine's defense forces struck it on March 7th. OSINT analysts report the possible use of ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles. The main goal of the Russian occupiers in the spring offensive is to seize the entire Donetsk and Luhansk regions. This was stated by the President Volodymyr Zelensky. However, the actions of Ukraine's defense forces are disrupting the enemy's plans. More on this in the report.
The Ukrainian armed forces' counteroffensive in the south has disrupted the Kremlin's plans for the spring of 2026. This is stated in a new report by analysts from the Institute for the Study of War.
Right now, what we are witnessing in the southern region is a clear example of one of those strategic attempts to seize the initiative, fundamentally change the enemy's tactical plans, and ultimately force them to react in the exact way that our military command envisions for this conflict. This, in turn, neutralizes their advantage in strength.
In particular, due to the advance of the defense forces, the Russian military command redeployed elite airborne and marine units from the Pokrovsky direction and Dobropilia to the southern front.
But we have stabilized the situation there. We are conducting counterattacks and the fighting is fluctuating back and forth. On the one hand, we are pushing them back, even launching counterattacks and liberating certain, albeit small, territories. They are trying to continue in other sectors.
But analysts note that they have fewer and fewer forces left to continue. The Russian grouping, which was supposed to entrench itself over the winter and launch a massive spring offensive, ultimately experienced the opposite effect. There are no fresh units to draw from, and the existing forces are constantly being redeployed along the front line to plug gaps. As a result, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine is already noting that the number of assaults by the occupiers has dropped by almost half in some directions.
At different times, they had 200, 250, up to 300 attacks daily. Now we are recording about 127, 125. This indicates that all the resources they are using along the front line are not limitless. They are now trying to maneuver their troops since, as they themselves have noted, they can no longer generate forces for all 8 strategic directions from Sumy to Kherson.
In recent days, this has been most noticeable in the area of the settlement of Pokrovska. There, our fighters continued their offensive, and even the fact that Russia once again transferred its reserves here did not change the situation.
Ukrainian fighters managed to secure positions in Ternov, as well as drive the enemy out of Berezove, and have likely entered Novorihorivka and engaged in battles for Sladko.
At the same time, Russian attempts to maneuver along the more than 1,200-kilometer front line are opening up new breakthrough opportunities for our military, as is happening, for example, in the area of Hulyai-Pol, which was an extremely difficult sector all winter.
And our systematic counterattacks, strikes on logistics and flanks in these sectors, as well as special operations carried out by our special operations forces and intelligence services, allow us to hold the front and destroy the vast majority of enemy troops in this sector.
Our fighters also distinguished themselves near Lyman. As reported by the 3rd Army Corps, the enemy, lacking enough assault troops, decided to advance here using an old, proven method, assemble a column of armored vehicles and try to break through our defenses. The result was quite predictable.
Russian infantry fighting vehicles and tanks were attacked by swarms of FPV drones from the Seva battalion unit. Ukrainian artillery also joined in the destruction of the column. Ukrainian strikes forced the Russian column to retreat, but as they withdrew, they were also pursued by Ukrainian drones. With the support of fighters from the 3rd Assault Brigade, the 63rd Mechanized Brigade, and artillery from the 60th Mechanized Brigade, every single piece of equipment was hit, as noted by the corps. As a result of the coordinated actions of the units, a tank, 3 armored personnel carriers, and enemy infantry were destroyed there.
At the same time, the defense forces are not forgetting about their deep strike missions. However, alongside the ongoing fires at oil refineries, military targets themselves have increasingly started to appear in the reports. Apparently, the reconnaissance and planning of many missions have reached their final stages.
The main intelligence directorate released a video showing drones attacking 2 Okhotnik patrol ships, a Project 1496 M1 Sea Tug, a Project 166.40 firefighting vessel, and another BK-16 landing craft. Most likely kamikaze drones equipped with Starlink antennas were used.
At the same time, assessing the overall situation at the front, analysts from the Institute for the Study of War believe that in March, Russia planned to continue exerting pressure and building on tactical successes near Orikhiv and Hulyai-Pola, as well as intensifying attacks in the area of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. However, the blocking of Starlink and the subsequent advance of the Ukrainian armed forces have clearly disrupted these plans. And now Russia is forced to abandon its major spring breakthrough.
Over the past 24 hours, Russia has lost at least 750 occupiers killed and wounded. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russian losses have reached 1,274,040 troops. In addition, during the last day, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 3 Russian tanks, 10 armored combat vehicles, 70 artillery systems and dozens of other pieces of enemy military equipment. In Kharkiv, search and rescue operations have been completed in the apartment building hit by a Russian missile on March 7th. The death of 10 residents of the 5-story building have been confirmed, including 2 children. Rescuers also recovered fragments of bodies that have not yet been identified. 4 people are still considered missing. 16 others were injured. Russia is expanding military units near the NATO border in order to use them as bases in case of a direct military confrontation with the alliance. This is according to Lithuanian intelligence. More about the growing Russian threat in the next report.
Russia is deploying its troops right on the NATO border. Lithuanian intelligence services are sounding the alarm after the end of the war in Ukraine. If sanctions are lifted, the Kremlin could launch a large-scale military conflict with the alliance in as little as 6 years.
Russia is expanding its military units on the NATO border, gaining combat experience in Ukraine, and may use them as bases in the event of a conflict with NATO. After the war, Lithuanian intelligence stated in its annual security threat assessment on Friday.
According to Lithuanian intelligence, based on the military experience gained in Ukraine, Moscow will create an army that is 30 or even 50% larger than it was before 2022, and much more modern. It will restore its strategic reserves of weapons and ammunition, and new divisions will be stationed along NATO's borders. All of this is already happening.
Once again, it is all about how Europe should remain on high alert and fear the danger that the war could eventually come to them. And if we take a moment to consider the current geopolitical landscape where Russia, for the time being, continues to navigate its complex international relations and internal policies amidst ongoing global scrutiny and shifting alliances,
so to speak, is testing the waters to understand exactly where NATO's red lines are, then the question of whether the Kremlin will attack, and if so, when and under what conditions, remains relevant.
Estonian intelligence. Russia will not attack NATO countries this year. According to intelligence assessments, if sanctions are lifted, Russia will be ready for a large-scale military conflict with NATO in 6 years.
But here it's important to consider another very significant aspect. When it comes to the Kremlin, ordinary logic does not apply.
Putin doesn't necessarily need logical calculations in order to attack. Because I remember very well, again, going back to the full-scale war, everyone was saying it was illogical, there weren't enough forces. It's not now, it'll happen later. To launch a full-scale offensive, you need these kinds of forces, this and that. But they weren't there. But Putin went ahead anyway. That's why when our European colleagues try to judge what's logical or illogical, that should be dismissed right away. Putin's logic is different.
Note that politicians' predictions about a NATO attack and those of the military differ slightly. These are somewhat different forecasts.
So 3 years, 5 years, those are nice time frames. But again, it's the politicians who are saying this. And when politicians speak, they're talking to their electorate. Don't worry, we still have 3 years, we'll get ready. We still have 5 years, we'll get ready. But there are also some phrases that really annoy me. There are still a few countries between us. But let's remember World War II, when politicians also thought there were some countries between them, and those countries surrendered at some point. Where's the guarantee that some country won't say, okay, that's it, we surrender, we don't want what happened in Ukraine, please don't kill us, we surrender? Could that happen? It could.
The Kremlin won't stop at Ukraine, it won't stop at the Baltic countries. This is an empire that will never have enough. And this empire will only stop when it gets punched in the teeth.
A politician should say this. Of course, it's a shot in the foot, but it's also a shot at a future enemy. Yes, there will be a war. Yes, we will prepare. That's what Ukraine didn't do either, which is why things turned out the way they did. A politician who scares the electorate is unpopular. Because who is going to vote for war? That's why if Europe doesn't explain to its citizens that what is happening in Ukraine is your war, if you don't want to fight, then help, but don't complain that something is being taken away from you. Because each of us would have paid a very large sum not to live through war. We would have raised any amount, taken out a loan, done whatever it took, just not this. But we didn't have a choice. I mean, we don't have one. We're already in this. But they have the option to help us, and that's the best kind of preparation. A fragmented Russian Federation, Putin punished, reparations and everything else. It's an example for everyone. You can't act this way. That's what readiness looks like, in my opinion. But that's a Ukraine-centered perspective. I'm not sure everyone in Europe supports all of this. And
today, Europe has a choice to do everything now so that in the future they don't have to face Russian tanks at home or to wait until the Kremlin regains its strength, prepares and attacks.
And there is more tension in the region. Belarus may be preparing a provocation against Poland. The situation along the border between the two countries is becoming increasingly unstable. More details in the report.
The Belarusian dictator Lukashenko has once again descended into senility. The aging Batka sees enemy plots everywhere.
And now I'll show you where the attack on Belarus was being prepared from.
In response, according to Western intelligence, Belarus, acting at the Kremlin's behest, has begun actively preparing its own provocations on the border with Europe, particularly in Poland, where Lukashenko and Putin have long promised to carve out the Suwałki corridor to Russia's Kaliningrad.
Intelligence, which has already informed a number of European intelligence agencies and communities, reports that Russia is preparing a whole series of subversive provocations and sabotage operations from Belarusian territory against several countries, including the Republic of Poland and official Warsaw.
Against this backdrop, Putin is only adding fuel to the fire by demonstratively sending more and more equipment and instructors to Belarus and establishing factories and enterprises there for the repair of military equipment and weapons. Lukashenko himself is conducting exercises on the border with Europe and inspections of defense capabilities.
These same men, having started a war not far from our borders,
either the aging dictator has eaten too many potatoes, or he forgot to take his medicine, but the Polish government has become wary of Lukashenko's statements.
I will definitely respond.
As a result, for security reasons, Poland is closing the airspace in the east of the country.
Officials from the Polish government have officially made an announcement that the country is completely shutting down their national airspace for a period of as long as 3 months, specifically from March 10th to June 9th, 2026. The airspace, the sky will be closed. All of this is being done as part of ensuring security.
Moreover, NATO troops have also gotten involved. They began demonstratively moving Western military equipment along Poland's borders, thereby showing Putin that he shouldn't provoke the alliance any further.
Well, that's just nonsense. Why are they...
But that's just nonsense. Why keep spreading it? The situation is not like that at all. There won't be a situation in 2026 where Russia attacks the Suwałki corridor, let alone Poland. That's nonsense.
Nevertheless, the Kremlin continues to push its agenda, stuffing Belarus with weapons, including nuclear ones. And all this, analysts explain, is because after the events in the Middle East, Putin is scared out of his wits. He understands perfectly well that if it comes to it, he could be removed just as quickly as the Iranian leader was. That's why he's trying to shift the blow from Moscow to Minsk.
The Russians want to use Belarusian territory in the event of a nuclear conflict so that the strike would hit Belarus, not Russia or Moscow.
However, it's unlikely that the Bunker 1's elaborate scheme will go unnoticed by Western intelligence agencies.
All their strategic plans regarding the use of Belarusian nuclear weapons, as they say, all of them will go down the drain.
As for Lukashenko, Poland made it clear by closing part of its airspace that it is not to be trifled with, and even less so to provoke Warsaw into further escalation. After all, if the West so desires, the Belarusian regime could fall just as suddenly as the Iranian one.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it so more people can see it. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. Ukraine has recorded the transfer by Russia to Iran of certain parts and technologies, including those related to drones. This was reported by President Volodymyr Zelensky. At the same time, the Ayatollah regime is currently not transferring missiles or other weapons to the Kremlin for strikes against Ukraine. Let me remind you, earlier, US President Donald Trump said he sees no signs that Russia is helping the Islamic Republic. But if they are doing it, he added, they are not doing a very good job because Iran is not doing too well. At the request of Washington, Kyiv has sent interceptor drones and a team of UAV experts to help protect American military bases in Jordan. This was reported by the New York Times. The newspaper notes that today, no country in the world has more practical experience in fighting Iranian attack drones than Ukraine. NATO air defense forces intercepted an Iranian ballistic missile that was flying toward Turkey. Its fragments fell in an open area. Earlier, it was reported that Turkey and Azerbaijan are joining efforts against Iran and Russia. This is seen as a response to the aggression of the Ayatollah regime supported by the Kremlin.
The Caucasus is on the brink of entering the war in the Middle East. Turkey and Azerbaijan are preparing for a conflict with Iran and Russia.
The entirety of our national armed forces, the Ministry of National Defense, the State Border Guard Service, and all other special forces units have now been brought to mobilization readiness level 1.
As part of the mobilization level 1 announced by Aliyev at the Security Council meeting, Baku has begun calling up reservists and the army has been brought to full combat readiness. Earlier, in response to attacks from Israel and the United States, Iran began firing all available weapons in every possible direction. In addition to Azerbaijan and the Gulf kingdoms, Iranian ballistic missiles were shot down over Turkey and Shahed drones near the island of Cyprus.
Under no circumstances will Turkey leave the defense of the country to chance and will act decisively.
The political leadership of Iran, represented by the foreign minister and the president, sometimes denies the strikes, then confesses and promises to stop. However, judging by the actions of Ilham Aliyev and Recep Erdogan, no one believes the words of the Persians.
Turkey is considering the possibility of deploying F-16 fighter jets in Cyprus, according to a source in the Ministry of Defense.
The Azerbaijani ethnic group in the northwest of Iran is adding fuel to the fire in the escalation between Baku and Tehran. According to various estimates, between 30 and 40 million people living in territories controlled by Tehran are ethnic Azerbaijanis.
Starting with the Treaty of Turkmenchay, when Azerbaijan was divided into two parts, one part went to the Russian Empire, while the larger part went to what is now Iran, which we refer to today as southern Azerbaijan, where 40 million of our ethnic brothers now live. Furthermore, it is widely understood that even in modern history, throughout the course of the last 35 years, secular Azerbaijan has consistently acted as a significant thorn in Iran's side, a very real and persistent thorn in their side.
Potentially, Moscow will become an ally of Tehran in its confrontation with Baku and Ankara. The Kremlin is already providing Iran with military and intelligence support.
And they support us politically as well as on other issues. Military cooperation between Iran and Russia is no secret. You know, we have worked with each other before, and this continues and will continue, I hope.
The Gulf countries, which are being struck by Iran, are finding Russian components and drones. But more importantly, against the backdrop of rapidly developing events in the Middle East, the value of the South Caucasus is rising significantly for the Kremlin.
Pressure on Azerbaijan isn't working because it's clear that Putin doesn't so much want to quarrel with Ilham Aliyev as he wants to avoid a direct conflict with Recep Tayyip Erdogan. But as the region's role as an area of stability grows, especially if Iran and the countries of the Persian Gulf become unstable, Russia may try to play its own game here. And that is very dangerous for the countries of the South Caucasus. This simply needs to be taken into account.
Will Putin decide to open a second front in the South Caucasus? Will Baku, in coordination with Ankara, launch military actions against Tehran? The region is heating up rapidly, and we will learn the answers to most of these questions in the near future.
And finally, about Ukraine's sport achievements. On the second day of the Paralympics, Ukraine's national team finished with 4 medals. All of them were won by para-biathletes. Maxim Murashkovsky won silver. Taras Radь, Alexandra Kononova and Dmytro Suyarko each won bronze. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Like, subscribe, comment, share. And see you next time.